All right, there's some huge news breaking right now. We're seeing a massive U.S. naval deployment, making waves, literally. The Pentagon is moving some of its most powerful ships to the Middle East, and you can bet that move is raising a ton of questions and tensions all around the globe. So let's get right into it and figure out what's really going on.
So what's the big question here? It's pretty straightforward. Why this? Why now? And why send a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East? I mean, this is a serious show of force, and it could mean a lot of different things. Everything from some high-stakes diplomatic maneuvering to, well, the prelude to something much more serious.
Okay, so the star of this show, if you will, is the USS Gerald R. Ford. And this isn't just any ship. It's the newest, biggest, baddest aircraft carrier on the entire planet. Right now, it's being pulled from its duties in the Caribbean and is heading on a week-long journey straight for the Middle East. And it's not going alone. It's there to meet up with another U.S. carrier that's already in the area.
And that brings us to the magic number 2. That's right. The U.S. is about to have 2 full carrier strike groups operating in the waters right near Iran. Now, to really get why that's such a massive deal, we've got to understand what these things actually represent.
Yeah, so let's be clear. This is not just a routine game of battleship, moving pieces around the board. No way. This is a very deliberate, very calculated show of force. So let's dive in and break down why parking 2 of these floating cities in one spot is such a big deal.
Okay, here's the thing you absolutely have to understand. Aircraft carriers are an incredibly rare and valuable asset. I mean, the entire U.S. Navy only has 11 of them. 11! So sending 2 of them, that's nearly 20% of the entire fleet to the same region. That's not something you do on a whim. That is a powerful, unmistakable signal that Washington is either getting ready for a major crisis or trying desperately to stop one from happening.
Now, of course, there's always an official story, right? So let's take a look at what the administration itself is saying publicly about this whole thing.
And here it is, straight from the source. President Trump has directly linked this deployment to the tense, ongoing nuclear talks with Iran. He's basically framing it as his Plan B. In case we don't make a deal, we'll need it. If we need it, we'll have it ready. You see, the message couldn't be clearer. Let's make a deal, or you'll have to deal with this.
But, you know, in the world of geopolitics, it's never that simple. There are always layers. So is this really all about forcing a deal? Or is this the U.S. gearing up for a fight? Well, analysts are looking at this and seeing 2 very different possibilities. So let's break down these 2 competing theories. On one side, you've got the negotiation tactic angle. This fits the president's style, right? He loves to crank up the pressure to get a better position at the bargaining table. And he said multiple times he doesn't want another war in the Middle East. The endgame here? A big political win with a new, better nuclear deal. Simple. But then, you look at the other side of the coin, the prelude to an attack theory. And the military math, it checks out. Having 2 carriers on hand gives the U.S. a huge advantage. It means they could launch a strike against Iran and be way less vulnerable to Iran's huge arsenal of over 3,000 ballistic missiles. The timing is also interesting. The order for this deployment came literally the day after a visit from Israel's prime minister, who's been very clear he's worried about a weak deal. You add that to the president's own warning of traumatic consequences for Iran, and suddenly it paints a much more aggressive picture. It's a real puzzle.
So to really wrap our heads around the stakes here, we need to talk about the hardware. We've been throwing around the term carrier strike group, but what does that actually mean? What kind of power are we really talking about?
Well, get this. A carrier, like the USS Ford is, first of all, a nuclear-powered behemoth. It carries over 75 military aircraft. We're talking F-18 Super Hornets, the works. It even has its own early warning planes, the E-2 Hawkeyes, that basically act as its eyes in the sky. But here's the kicker. It never, ever travels alone. It's the queen on the chessboard, surrounded by a fleet of guided missile cruisers and destroyers. And these support ships are armed to the teeth for any kind of warfare you can imagine. Air, sea, even under the water. So you see, this isn't just one ship. It's a mobile fortress with just staggering offensive and defensive power.
Okay, but this whole situation isn't just a 2-player game between Washington and Tehran. The entire region is holding its breath, and this is more like a complicated chessboard with a lot of other powerful players. And they all have their own moves to make. And really, you've got the White House being pulled in 2 completely opposite directions. On one side, you have Israel. They are deeply worried about any deal that only covers the nuclear issue. They want Iran's missiles and its regional proxies on the table too. For them, this show of force is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to maybe neutralize a threat they've faced for decades. But then on the other side, you've got key Gulf Arab states like Oman and Qatar. What are they doing? They're actively trying to mediate to find a peaceful way through this. And they have flat out warned the U.S. against a military strike. Why? Because they know it would unleash absolute chaos across the region, and they'd be right in the middle of it.
So, okay, when you stir all of this together, the immense military power, the high-stakes diplomacy, all those competing regional pressures, what you end up with is an incredibly tense, high-stakes balancing act.
And at the very core of this balancing act is a classic military strategy term, deterrence. It's a simple idea, really. The whole point is to use this overwhelming show of force to make the other side stop and think, to convince Iran that the consequences of not making a deal or of doing anything aggressive would just be too painful to bear.
And that leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? In a region this tense, where every single move is being watched under a microscope, where is the line? Where does deterrence stop and provocation begin? Because what one side calls a necessary precaution, the other can easily see as a direct threat. And right now, the U.S. is walking that razor-thin edge, and the whole world is watching to see which way it's going to tip.